This is Uncommonly Remarkable. We have surprisingly casual discussions about the lives and notable accomplishments of community leaders, entrepreneurs, and everyday folks like you and me. Think of this podcast as an opportunity to learn something new and to pick up on an entrepreneurial tip or two through open conversation. I'm Artis Beatty. I'm a doctor of optometry and the chief medical officer for My Eye Doctor OD. Though we will inevitably touch on topics within my area of expertise, the opinions and conversations held here are separate from my work with My Eye Doctor. Welcome to the show. Sonnie Braxton studied deadly viruses, worked in global vaccine safety, raised kids overseas during a pandemic, and survived a ruptured appendix that nearly took her life. But instead of going back to the lab, she followed a higher calling. In this episode, Sonnie shares her incredible journey from science to purpose as she launches Grace Under Fire, an executive coaching company focused on helping women lead with strength, rest, and resilience. Ladies, gentlemen, all you remarkable people, please welcome Sonnie to the show. Sonnie, welcome to the show. It is so exciting to have you here. I could not wait to get you on. And there have been a lot of things that have changed in your schedule, things that we're going to talk about today that made it really hard for us to get this going. But we are here and I'm excited for it.
Thank you. Thank you for being patient with me. It has been a long road coming to getting here. So I'm glad to finally be here.
So, for the audience, I did a lot of interviews with people that I've known for a long time when we started the show. I've gone off and done a lot of different things now, and I've met people. I've gotten to interview people from across the world. It's been kind of cool, but nobody really is exciting as you are. I mean, there was a time when I wasn't sure if you were a CIA agent or not. With you going to working around the world, all of your travel. I mean, you studied viruses, for goodness sakes, right? So there's a lot that you've done. And so I think this is just going to be a brilliant conversation.
Well, I'm excited. I can't wait for it.
So why don't we start by maybe telling us just a little bit about what you were doing today.
Okay.
And then we will back up and talk about how you got there.
Okay. That sounds great. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a CEO and founder of Grace Under Fire, which is an executive coaching company and consulting. In particular, I work with leaders who are looking to strive to that next level, but I want them that are also looking to find balance. Leaders that are trying to help their direct reports grow and learn and understand. In particular, I'm interested in female leaders who want to pave the way for other women. I have been blessed in my career with having some amazing female leaders who helped open doors for me, helped encourage me and motivate me when I might have lacked the confidence in certain spaces. And I saw how much that impacted my career. And so that's an area where I want to give back to other women and help in that space and helping them grow.
That's absolutely amazing. And so you have now found time to found a company with all the things that you have been involved in and that you're doing, which is absolutely amazing. So let's talk a little bit, though, about how Sonnie got here.
Sure,
right?
Sure.
And so if I would go back maybe 10 years and think about where you were, right, there was a lot going on between the travels and the studies and the work. And so you were a virologist.
Yes.
And you don't meet very many virologists.
It's true.
What in the world does a virologist do?
Sure. So a virologist studies viruses. They can be in academics, in industry, in a lot of different areas. I started off in academics, getting my PhD at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I then went on to do my postdoc at Wake Forest University doing vaccine development, in particular smallpox vaccine development. From there, I went to work on vaccine manufacturing with a large manufacturing company, which taught me a lot in that space and got me into the world of biological manufacturing. And then from there, went on into my later career. But in the short sense, a virologist basically studies viruses.
And how did you get there though? Like, a lot of us have these biology backgrounds, and we think, oh, what are we going to do with them?
Mhm.
And people go into molecular biology, they go into medicine, dentistry. There's a lot of biological fields. How did you pick viruses?
Okay, so it's going to be a funny story. So I think it was like my sophomore year of undergrad. I was in engineering actually, and I had taken a medical microbiology class, which I just fell in love with, which I didn't think I would, but I fell in love with. I read this book called, it was by Robin Cook. It might have been like Outbreak or Contagion or something. And it was about Ebola and in a fictional environment. And I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds really crazy that a virus could really do that. And so I was piqued. I was like, is this virus even real? And, what is that? And so I spent that summer, like kind of in the library, like learning about Ebola. So like this was before the digital age, before you had smartphones to be able to look it up. And so I learned that Ebola was real and that it's an RNA virus. And it was just very interesting. And so I was like, wow. It's like, I think viruses are interesting. And so I kind of changed a little bit of my trajectory in undergrad. I didn't change my major, but I had the opportunity to do a summer research program in Budapest, Hungary, studying HIV. So that was my very first experience with working with viruses, and it was so interesting. My first international travel.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. And so then that led on to my interests from there. When I went back, didn't finish my undergraduate degree, I then moved to Seattle and worked at Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center and the Seattle Children's Hospital and their clinical virology lab. So starting off the very entry level, samples, all of the fun stuff, working with blood, all of the different things, learning all about it, and said, wow, I still really like this. So then I applied to different graduate programs to get my PhD in virology and decided to come back home to North Carolina and UNC, and it went from there. So like viruses have always been a passion of mine. My career, I thought I was going to go slightly different before I met my husband, but I'm not sad on on where I ended up. I did think I was going to study Ebola long term and work in some very hot zones, as you would say, but that's not at all what I did.
Wow. And so when you're thinking about or you're studying viruses, is it to see how they function? Is it to see how you can cure them? Like what is the focus of, say, when you were in Budapest and you were studying HIV? Like what was the focus there on that with that virus?
So when we were studying HIV in Budapest, it was looking at different types of disinfectants that could be used to kill HIV. And so it was very looking at the detailed methods that you could use in a lab and different disinfectants and how you would test that to make sure that you're actually killing the virus, and what does that look like? So in that space, that's what that summer was about. When I was in graduate school, I studied dengue viruses. So dengue causes a hemorrhagic fever. It's transmitted by mosquitoes. So I would get mosquito samples and have to grind up mosquitoes to extract virus and grow virus up. So it was just a very interesting area. I was so interested in how something so tiny could cause such major catastrophic events. This was long before COVID, the COVID pandemic and anything like that. I think at the time when people were talking about pandemics, it was the 1918 Spanish flu.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really thinking about SARS or anything like that, or even the first SARS epidemic that happened.
Yeah. So it's kind of neat for me to think about it, because in my head, I think, oh, we're studying viruses. It's immediately vaccines and prevent and cures, right? Like those are the things that come to mind. But there is a whole world of, just as you described, even disinfectant, like learning what to do to keep people safe from the virus in the first place, rather than having to do the things to clean up after the virus has gotten there. And just doesn't come to top of head. And so that's kind of really cool.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of different aspects you can look at. So some of it's immunology, your immune response and how it gets triggered by a virus, and how a virus evades your immune response. And that's a lot of in the vaccine development and things that you're looking at. It can be from how do you make vaccines on a large scale, and what does that look like in terms of shipping, refrigeration or lyophilization. How do you get it to countries that don't have general refrigeration in needs and things like that? And so really looking at the stability of something that you make and how does it get around the world to different places. So there's lots of different areas that you can look at for viruses. So for me, it was just, it all just energized me. So I was excited about that.
And you started off, you went to Budapest, then you came back, you went to Seattle, but like you ended up all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
How did it go from UNC to world travel?
Okay, so that's a good question. So when I was also at UNC in my undergrad, I also spent a month in Sri Lanka studying dengue viruses. So I went during that time frame as well, which was interesting because you're in a lab that has a lot of beautiful technology, but if you imagine the humidity of North Carolina and in India or like Sri Lanka, that there's just, you would see labs with amazing technology, but humidity that's kind of corrupting the equipment and different things like that. And you're like, how do I set up certain things that aren't going to be impacted by the environment? And so it's different, unique challenges than what you would experience in the United States and, the labs here. So it's like really thinking about how do I set up something for the needs of that area and what that looks like. So that was part of my travels that I did during my graduate work. And then I did my postdoctorate at Wake Forest and got married during that time frame. And then I went to work, like I said, for a vaccine manufacturer and we had 2 kids during that time frame. I switched over to another company that was actually working on neurodegenerative diseases. That was not a company that specifically focused on viruses, but they needed to make sure that every lot of product that they delivered was free of viruses. So then my role shifted into doing a lot of testing and diagnostics to make sure that everything that we manufactured was free from viruses. And then that role evolved into something that we call like viral safety. So making sure that the company in your manufacturing facility has gone through risk assessments and thought through what are all possible ways that a virus could get introduced into your system and making sure you have the necessary controls in place. So again, this was all before COVID and all of this happened, but we were already thinking long before that of, if a person came into work today and, they're experiencing viral symptoms, what controls do we have in place to prevent that person from contaminating what they're working with and thinking about different things like that.
And talk about a skill set that transfers, right? Because you go if you're really thinking about that, the safety aspect is extremely important because we take for granted that most of the things that we come in contact with, from medications, particularly injectable medications, things that we use day to day, don't have anything in them. We assume they're sterile, right? And we assume that they're going to be safe to use, but they wouldn't be without someone making sure that the process is in place to prevent that from happening.
Yes.
Wow. And so when we saw the pandemic start to unfold, as someone who'd spent so much time with viruses, like, what did you think? And how did you react as this COVID virus was all over the place?
It was a very surprising time frame. I think initially in my head, I was thinking about, your traditional small scale viral outbreak. Usually if you stay put, don't go anywhere, within about 2 weeks, that virus is going to die off and not go anywhere. The part that I didn't think about was human behavior. And sometimes how humans either do or do not adhere to rules and regulations and different things. And then as people move and spread and go to different areas. So it was from a virology perspective, it was interesting to see on a global scale how it spread and how quickly and how it moved through different ways. Because again, my background is focusing on the virus, not on the person, not necessarily on human behavior and how are we involved in that transmission of virus and moving it around in different areas. And you're sick, you hop on a plane, you now have coughed around a whole bunch of people and then, and then you've moved on. So it was interesting to watch that. I, definitely would have long conversations with my husband about the pandemic and things like that, and having a lot of questions. And then we get a lot of questions from family and friends. on things that they could do and stay safe. And I can say now my kids, who are 11 and 13, have one little tiny germaphobe right now who's very aware about like washing hands and everything. And, we talk about how viruses can get transmitted. And I think they can actually explain how a virus can get transmitted and about your immune response. And, we talk about tiny little armies in your body that are sent to go fight.
That's amazing. I mean, tiny little armies. It is a very interesting statement to say that you studied the virus, not the people, because if it were up to just the virus, the 2-week time period that we all went into the pandemic thinking we were just going to have the 2 weeks would have actually been enough.
Yeah.
But people were doing what people do, and it just allowed for it to proliferate in a way I don't think anybody could have really predicted. And then once it was out and about, it was just impossible to stop. And it's almost like going back to the book you read about outbreak,
yes,
right?
Very much.
And that here we are now with a real live outbreak of something that was passing from person to person. And people weren't really sure exactly how that was happening. Yeah. And making decisions was very, very difficult. And so if you as an expert in it are like, well, yeah, I know how the virus works, but all of this other stuff with people moving around, not my thing. Yeah. That's a real reason for the confusion that I think we faced over the first several months before we started thinking about vaccines.
Yes, very much so. And human behavior plays so much into that, whether it's concerns or fears or all of those different things, and how you react based off of that impacts significantly on the spread of a virus. But you don't think about that from personal behavior and human behavior, but it does.
And so you were doing all of these things and you were raising children.
Yes.
And so when you start to think about your commitments from the professional side and your commitments as a mom, how did you think about balancing those things so that you could continue to be successful and raise your children the way you wanted to? Because I know you guys were making decisions about if you guys were going to be out of the country for a while and all of these things. Like, how did you balance those types of thoughts?
Oh, that's a good question. I have to say I'm very blessed with an amazing husband who is an amazing partner and helps out in so many different ways. So without his help, I would say it wouldn't have been possible. But when our kids were little, it's funny, a little bit of an aside story. When our kids were little, I decided to run a half marathon. So I would train at night after they would go to bed, and it would give me that window of time between like 9 p.m. and midnight of where I would training and do that. So when our kids were little, I did my MBA while they were little. So I took evening MBA program while I was working during the day, and so I do homework when they would go to bed. So it taught me that you could compartmentalize and do different things, but I definitely had to have the support. So my husband was taking care of doctor's appointments, planning birthday parties, and all the things that I might have done before. So he would take over those areas to help support me in growing and with my career and things like that. But we always had it as a back and forth of always talking about what each other is interested in and how we're planning to move forward, and making sure that we have the buy-in from each other to help support. Because when one's striving to move their career forward, then the other person has to help out in a different way, and being okay with that. And so we've taken turns with that, especially as we moved to Switzerland, which I know I didn't quite allude to, but we also moved to Switzerland during the pandemic, and that was a huge shift. So we went for my job at the time. And so he helped out significantly with the kids and things like that while we were in Switzerland. And now that we're back, we've shifted back and forth.
So, yeah, I knew you guys were in Switzerland during that pandemic period. Tell me a little bit about what it was like to be out of the U.S. with young children in Switzerland with Adam learning to speak German.
German, yes.
Because there's a rule about that, right? Like you were there for work, but if he was going to stay with you, he had to be able to speak German.
The trailing spouse had to pass
the test.
Pass an A1 test, yes. So it was really interesting because all of this happened during the pandemic. So I actually interviewed like a week before the world shut down, surprisingly. So didn't know all of this was coming. we moved to Switzerland in August of 2020. As soon as we got there, we quarantined for 2 weeks in our apartment. So had to learn, online shopping and groceries as soon as we got there and had a grocery order. So trying to figure out how to navigate, because the kids were also still in virtual school. So they were doing virtual school in the United States while we were in Switzerland until they started school in Switzerland. So we were all trying to figure out how to make that happen in a 2-bedroom apartment for a while.
And the weird time zones.
And the weird time zones, yes. So I was working Swiss hours, so European hours, and they were on school for U.S. hours, and my husband was on work for U.S. hours.
Oh my gosh.
So, and it's funny because a lot of that prevailed through the 3 years that we were in Switzerland. So Adam would work U.S. hours. I would work Swiss hours, and then sometimes some U.S. hours because I also maintained my U.S. team while I was in Switzerland. So it was working all different kind of time zones and making it work. But it was a wonderful experience because the kids got to go to school. As soon as we moved to Switzerland and they enrolled in a school, they were already back to school face-to-face. So kids were wearing masks. They were doing weekly testing of each classroom to make sure that kids could be in person in learnings.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which is a really big difference than what was happening here, because there was the gamut of things going on depending on which geography you were in the U.S. But most U.S. schools were remote is the way, and they were trying to do remote without people having to be in person. So that's a really big difference.
It was a very big difference because they were able to go in person and be a part of that. And it was a really great for their learning environment. But all little kids were wearing masks, like masks were required in school. And it was just a very different environment because I would take the train in to work during that time frame. Everybody wore a mask on the train. It was expected. It was a part of the requirements. At work, it's funny, I actually went into work more when I was living in Switzerland than I did during the pandemic here. So because we were considered essential workers in what we were making. So we were on site at least 2 to 3 times a week, but we had to really be mindful of how we worked. So you would have like an A team and a B team. And so A team would always work together. B team would always come in the opposites and switch so that you weren't have the potential to contaminate an entire team, so that if one person went down on the team, then the whole team would quarantine and be out. So it was a very different way of working during that time frame.
And was it important for you guys for the kids to experience us living outside the country for that long?
So I would have to say this was completely a blessing and by chance. So we did not ever plan to live outside the United States. So I had the wonderful opportunity of taking this role and living outside the United States. So we had never actually talked about living outside of the United States. And so they had to actually trust me because when the time came for us to move, they hadn't visited Switzerland. They hadn't seen it or anything. And so I was like, well, you just trust me, you're going to love this. And if you don't, it's only going to be for a few years.
Fair enough.
So they all moved with me sight unseen, having never been to Switzerland. I had gone a few times for work trips, but they had never visited Switzerland. And so they trusted me enough to move sight unseen from everything they knew in the United States to Switzerland.
That's absolutely fantastic. And because I think originally it was going to be some period of time, but it got longer. And then it got longer.
So it was supposed to be 2 years, and then it got extended for another year. So we were there for 3 full years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And so if you look back at the time you spent there with your family, is there something that you learned that you didn't expect to about family life, or something you learned in general from being in Switzerland?
Yeah. So the need to take time for family. In Switzerland, they really value that. So Sundays, things are closed. Grocery stores, shops, everything is closed. So it's meant that you spend time with family. So on Sundays, you would see grandparents, grandkids, grandparents with like a walker out walking on the streets. So it's like a family of 8 just going on a Sunday stroll. So it's really meant that you spend time with family. Lunch times, you don't work through lunch. You take a lunch break. Pharmacies, banks, they all close during lunchtime. So you can't go run your appointments during lunchtime because they're closed. So it's really meant to have rest and to do that. And so it was hard shifting from the US mindset into that. So it probably took me about 6 months to really be able to learn to slow down. But that was one of the things I learned to value. It was that time and that peace to spend with our family and to go out and to interact as a family. And so coming back to the US, I would say that's been hard to protect. But it's something that is in the forefront of my mind always, of making sure to protect that time, because you get so much energy and rejuvenation by taking that time.
I think that's a really, really good point, and one that we often lose. So I had the opportunity to go to Switzerland in 2 years ago.
Okay.
And we were there through a Sunday, and we were shocked because there was absolutely zero things happening on the Sunday. But I think you're right in that you start to learn that some of the things that we do all the time, we do them because that's what we do. But when you take a step back and are able to actually relax and take it all in, there's something to be said for that, right?
Yes.
And so it's great that you picked that as one of the things that you were going to try to keep doing as you got back here.
Yes.
And had the working lunches, which are very, very much the thing, right?
Yes.
So you guys have also traveled outside of work, the world. And in a lot of those travels, you've brought the children with you. Tell me a little bit about why that feels important to you, because that's a big commitment to do, to bring them along, but also to leave them and go places too. So how do you think about that piece, and how, and again, that balance with the things that are happening with the family and now your new business?
Yes. Okay. So traveling with the kids has been very important for us, for them to see the world. When I was little, I had not been on a plane until I was 20. So I hadn't left the United States until I was 20 years old. So for them to get a chance to see the world was very important. But we also want them to be citizens of the world, to understand that some of the privileges that they have here in the United States, that's not how the rest of the world operates. We want them to see that, to understand that, and to have empathy, so that as they live and grow, that they have a mindset of helping and serving others, and making sure that they do what they can to be helpful in different ways. So even whether it's in a classrooms here or in different places, to always say, how can I help? What can I do to help? So one of the travels that we did was last summer. We went to Belize on a mission trip, and we went and painted a school. We went and read to children and practiced reading with them. But it was very important that we took our kids on this trip, because we wanted to pick an opportunity that they could be involved in and where they could serve, so that they're not watching us serve. We want them to be a part of the serving and helping out with others. So it was very critical that we get them involved. Our youngest son has special needs. He has a rare disease called VACTERL. So in many cases, he uses a wheelchair when we're traveling. He has a walker day to day that he uses in school and things like that. So it's also important because a lot of people have helped him. But I need him to understand that it's not always people giving to you, but how do you give back to those around you? So we also sought out a mission where he could be involved in that and be a part of it, so that he learns how he can help and serve others.
That's incredible. And it's one of the, and that particular mission was super powerful. It was crazy though, because I called Adam because I was like, oh, hey, I just was catching up with you. What are you doing? And he's like, I'm in a school in Belize. And I'm like, what? And so it's just, I never know where you guys might be, right? But it was outrageous, because he picked up and he was like, oh, but I'm busy right now. I'll call you back later. And he was telling me a lot about what was going on there. And I just found that absolutely amazing, in the work that was being done and what it meant for the children that would be going to those schools.
Yes. And it was so interesting because the kids were actually out for summer break. And so they had advertised that we were going to be there. And so anybody who wanted to send their child, for extra practice and reading, to send them. And I think we had like 30 kids, way more than we were expecting.
Oh, wow.
Way more than we were expecting. So we actually had to break up into like groups. And it was great because my sons, we paired them with kids younger than them so that they could help them with their readings. I'm like, you guys know how to read, so you're more than capable of being able to help kids that are younger than you with reading. So based on reading level and things like that, we kind of broke off into different groups to help out with the kids. So it was just an amazing opportunity. And I actually got to meet a few different Americans that were there that had moved to Belize that were doing different missions. One was trying to get prosthetics to individuals of low income in the area. And another one was bringing baseball to Belize because baseball is not like a typical sport that you play in the area. And so trying to get bats and balls and gloves and things donated from the United States for kids there so they could set it up.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Because, when you think about missions, you most often think about critical things, right? And you don't always think about the people in general because we are not all critical things. We need to have other outlets, and we need to be able to participate in a sport or to be able to do something that's fun. And we take for granted that you take care of all the critical stuff. You don't worry about all that. But to create a whole person, you actually need some of those other things. And so that mission sounds amazing.
It was. We really enjoyed it and got so much out of it. And just also seeing the kids blossom in that space was exactly what we were looking for. And I have to say that, again, I'm blessed with Adam because I kind of was just like, hey, I want us to do a mission trip. And he was like, okay, where do you want to go? I was like, I don't know. I was like, I'm going to find a place though. And so when we got there, they're like, well, what are your expectations? I was like, honestly, I don't have any expectations. I'm like, I'm just here to see how this goes. And so they just, they're like, okay, well, what are you interested in here and here? And I was like, just use us however we can, however we can be best helpful to you and your community. So it just kind of went into it open-minded. And again, so Adam's just along for the ride. He's just like, okay, whatever she says, I'll just go along with it. So I'm fortunate because I come up with some crazy ideas and some last minute, kind of travels and stuff with it. And he's always very accepting and going along with it on the adventure.
Well, you have had a ton of adventures, but recently you had to deal with a whole bunch of just health issues that I find like absolutely incredible that you've been able to not only get through those, but also work on your passion now. And so if you don't mind sharing a little bit, because it was absolutely out of nowhere and really just changed your life, right?
Yeah, a lot. So I made the decision to leave corporate last October to follow my passion of starting my business. So I was taking time to rest. We were traveling a little bit over Christmas. We went to visit to Disney with some friends and had a wonderful time. And the day after Christmas, I started not feeling great. And I was like, oh, I just must have a stomach virus or something. And so I thought that's what it was. And, the pain just kind of kept getting worse and worse. And a few days later, I finally said to Adam, I was like, okay, I need to go to the emergency room. And he's like, okay, I'll take you. And I said, no. I said, I'm in so much pain. You cannot pick me up right now. Wow. I said, I need you to call the ambulance. And so it was a scary experience, especially for our kids, because to see, paramedics coming in and carrying your mom out, like on a gurney and stuff. And they were just like, freaking out. And so, and amazingly so. So by the time we made it to the hospital, which we're very fortunate that there's a hospital right down the street from us. It was only like 3 to 5 minutes away. They realized that my appendix had ruptured, and that's what was causing the pain. And that by that point, it had gotten pretty bad. So it probably had ruptured a few days before.
Oh my gosh.
So they planned to do surgery in the morning. By that time, they went in and did the first surgery, and I still wasn't getting better a few days later. So about 5 days later, they went in and did another exploratory surgery and realized that part of the appendix was still remaining, and that's what was causing me to still have very high bacterial load in my blood and stuff. So from there, I had that surgery. And so trying to figure out how do we manage with kids and me being in the hospital. And Adam was amazing and stayed every single night with me in the hospital that I was there. I ended up being there 19 days in the hospital, and he stayed with me every night. But that's where we learned the value of community. Originally, I had been hesitant about sharing that information with friends, but I was like, why not share this with friends? And so put it out there in our community. I was just like, yeah, I'd really appreciate prayers and, just thinking of us right now. And we had the overwhelming response of people reaching out saying, how can we help? What can we do? I had one friend who she originally had said, hey, can I pick up the kids and, watch them? And I was like, no, we're good. And I was like, Adam's got this. And she was just like, so she stopped messaging me. And I realized she messaged Adam. She's like, I'm coming to pick up your kids. I'm not going to take no for an answer. I'm going to come and pick up your kids for the next few days. And we're like, okay. And so then I realized I really needed that, but I didn't want to put like them out and, because I knew that they had a lot on their plate. And so it was an opportunity where I said, I need to accept help. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with accepting help and being vulnerable to say, this is what I need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a hard learning, isn't it?
It is.
It's because, when you've been self-sufficient, you've done all the things, you've really been able to take care of most things that come up. You are used to being kind of in charge and doing the thing, right?
100%.
And so it's hard to ask people for help. But once you understand that people are actually the people you surround yourself with, the ones that are proud of you and that work with you, and like they want to be able to give you something because you've given them quite a bit. Right. Yeah. And it's all about being able to understand that and relax and let people help you out. Because there will be a day when those people need help from someone too. Yeah. And so it's that circle thing that happens when you allow that to happen.
Yeah. I really understood in that moment community and the need for community. And we really saw the community that we had around us, and we're so amazed. We had so many friends that offered to come and stay with the kids and would stay with the kids, pick them up from school or bring meals by or come visit me in the hospital. So many different ways we were showered with love and support, and I would not have even expected it. It taught me that lesson of how important a community is and why it's important. But also to be able to ask for help and it's okay to sit still. That was a new concept for me. Oh, it's weird to be able to say it at this point, but it really was. For a very long time in the hospital, I couldn't do anything. I just could sit there and stare at the ceiling. And someone was like, do you want me to turn on the TV? And I was like, no. I was like, I don't even know why, but I don't want to watch TV. I don't want to read a book. I mean, I love to read books and stuff. I'm like, for several days, I just couldn't do anything but sleep. And so I realized that my body needed that rest. And as I slowly started to come back out of it, small little things that people would drop off, like adult coloring books or crochet kits and things like that, that it really was the rest that my body needed and that my mind needed. Because I had been in that go culture for so long that I didn't know how to rest. And it's funny because that time frame that I took off from when I left corporate to before I was going to start my business, because I had said, okay, the fall is my rest period. And Adam was like, you are the most busiest non-working person right now. I was like, well, this is my rest period. And he's like, you're not resting.
You're resting very little.
Exactly. And so I felt like that was also a sign from God for me to be like, I called you to rest. You haven't rest. So I'm going to make you rest. And it was an amazing opportunity that I learned so much about that I now plan that into my days, like each day, a period of rest and knowing how important that is for me to be able to operate. And I can tell on the days where I don't adhere to it. I notice it and I feel it and I feel extra worked and tired. And I'm like, oh, because I didn't take that rest. So it's been one of those things I really have focused on and trying to think about Sundays as well as a day of rest, as a day of Sabbath and taking that.
So how scary was it to make the decision that you were going to leave what you've known as work and do this new venture?
Very scary. But I would say when I think about my faith, I felt like that's where God was calling me into that space, which was scary because I was like, okay, I've spent all of my education, my training in this world, for, 15 years of experience in the industry, plus my PhD, plus all of the other things that I did before. And I was like, and you want me to go do something different? So it was very scary. And it was a bit of an identity shift of trying to say, my impact on this world is not based off of my job. It's, what I do and how I use my talents towards others. And so really stopping to think about how do I shepherd that well, and what impact can I do for other people in that space. And so it was a definite difficult transition, but for me, I really felt that's where I was heading to in that next space. And I felt like the few years before of traveling was all in preparation for heading into this new journey for us. So, yeah.
And so as you look forward and you're in this venture, how are you thinking about your plan? Like it's somewhat daunting to start from zero and really have to accelerate a business. So are you learning things along the way?
Oh, I'm learning so much along the way. I have learned about rest. Rest is that very key piece of putting it in day to day, but also understanding that sometimes some of the diversions and distractions aren't really distractions. They're things that I'm meant to learn. They're things that I'm meant to experience. Lunches or connecting with different people are stories and experiences I'm meant to live. And so that those are important moments to take time to connect with different people, to go out to lunch, to hear their story, to hear what's going on, because you never know how that can shape you in a different way down the road. So I'm learning more about those connections, that how important and valuable they are, and to take time in them. When we sit down and watch movies with the kids and things like that, before I would probably be on my phone, like searching through something. And now I'm just like, nope, I'm turning my phone over. I'm going to be present in this moment and really thinking about that. And it's giving me a new appreciation of life, of just noticing all of the wonderful things around us as we go through and stopping to enjoy that.
I love that. So as people are listening, they're interested, they want to find out more about you and the work that you do. How do they find you?
Okay, that's a great question. So I'm on LinkedIn as Cassandra L. Braxton. You can also visit my website at grace-under-fire.com. So my company is Grace Under Fire. You can find me on Facebook as Cassandra Braxton as well.
Awesome. I'll put links for all of that on the episode description, so people who are driving, doing other things can go back and find it and click it.
Okay.
But I am just so excited for you. You're just such a warm person, and it's just, you've been through so many things and you've been successful on multiple levels. And so I just know you're going to be extremely successful in this new venture.
Thank you.
And I can't wait to just see where things go. And maybe we'll get you back and we'll talk about things along the way, because it's really nice to get to start talking about business growth on the ground level, because you start with where you are today, and we're going to get to talk about where you go, and we'll look back and say, do you remember when? And it's going to be awesome.
Yes. And I mean, I'm amazed to be here now, because I know Adam was on your podcast a couple of years ago. And I was jealous that he was
Were you really?
I was completely jealous.
Oh my goodness.
But I was also proud of him. I was very, very proud in listening to his podcast and how well he did. So.
That's so funny. And when I was talking with Adam, we were talking about all the things that we remember, and like secretly I was like, yeah, but I got to get your wife on because she's got some cool stuff going on.
I heard you say that in the podcast.
And so here we are. We made it.
We finally made it. And I'm glad that we got to have this opportunity, because we were actually supposed to meet before I got sick.
That's right.
And we were scheduled during the time frame when my appendix ruptured. So it got significantly delayed for having this conversation.
And then when you actually got through and you were feeling good and I saw it pop up, I was like, yes. We finally get to have our call.
Yes. I've been waiting. I was like, okay, I've got to be able to be okay enough that I can make it through the entire interview. So,
and you did fantastic. I got to tell you, thank you for spending the time with me today. This has been phenomenal.
Thank you. I have enjoyed this so much, and I'm excited to be on your podcast. So thank you for inviting me.
If you've made it this far, then I have to thank you for your time. I hope you've learned something new and enjoyed listening to the discussion as much as I enjoyed having it. I'd love to hear from you about the show, because we're working really hard to bring you great content, and the feedback really helps us get better. If you like what you've heard or watched, for those of you who are streaming out on YouTube, then take a split second to give us a thumbs up or a like. It really helps other people like you find the show too. And no one likes to miss out on the good stuff. So go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't have to wonder when or if there's a new episode. And until next time, stay remarkable.